Hello, Sylvia. So welcome to the IEP Live Learn Lunch, everybody. We're really excited about today's session. We've got Lee and Adam joining us from Society Matters to talk to us about universal credit and make sure that we understand what the impact that changes can have. Before I hand you over to them today, though, what I did want to mention is next week's IEP Live Learn Lunch. We're really excited to be having a Christmas gathering where we'll have some fun. We'll look at the year, we'll look at the positives from 2020. And I know sometimes it doesn't feel like there have been any, but we want to look back on some of those. Got a bit of a quiz for you as well. So if you're a little bit competitive, come along. My daughter's going to be joining us and asking some questions. So if you do have kids at home from school, don't feel that that stops you from joining in. So hopefully we'll see you all then. But that's next week. This week, what you've really come to find out about is universal credit. So I'm going to hand you over at this point to Lee and Adam, and I'll speak to you all again at the end. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Helen. If you just bear with me a moment, I'll get that PowerPoint open on the screen. Just be a moment. Just having a think about it, just bear with me a moment there. Okay, so for Society Matters. So it's my great pleasure to take you through universal credit over the next half an hour with my colleague Adam Matthews, who is our social welfare instructor. So a little bit about Society Matters first of all. We're a trading subsidiary of Citizens Advice Gateshead, and we're a social enterprise, and we're all about adding value and services for society to organisations. We also focus on adding social value to people who are putting contracts in and bids to help you achieve that 30% as well. So if you check out our website, you'll get further information on there. Now, we've been working with lots of different organisations right across the country, and we're proud to have worked with National Citizens Advice, the likes of Northumbria Water, Centrepoint staff, their frontline staff on universal credit and personal independence payment, and lots of other courses there. So we've helped mobilise the knowledge that we've got at Citizens Advice and Society Matters to help them obviously spread the wings and help people within their environments. Okay, so we're going to look at the 6 elements of universal credit first of all. So the 6 elements that make up universal credit are the standard element, the child element, the childcare element, the carers element, the limited capability for work-related activity element, and the housing element. So those are the 6 elements that make up universal credit. Now, everybody is entitled to the standard element of universal credit. So this is claimed for the household, and the standard allowance depends on your age, which I'll go into in a moment. And couples have a joint claim and one shared payment. Now, if we look at what the 4 rates are at the moment, if you're single and aged under 25, you're entitled to £342.72 per calendar month. If you're single and aged over 25, you're entitled to £409.89 per calendar month. And if you're a couple both aged under 25, you're entitled to £488.59 per calendar month. And if you're a couple or one or both are aged 25 or over, you are entitled to £594.04 per calendar month. Now, these rates at the moment are temporary. Okay, there was an £80 increase, or roughly £80 increase, that occurred in April this year. And this was applied by the government because of what was going on with COVID. Now, the government haven't yet decided whether they're going to keep this increase. So we still don't know come April next year whether or not these rates will reduce by £80 a month. So a lot of people think they're better off on universal credit, when actually come April next year, that might not be the case. So that's just something to be aware of. Okay, so we're going to look at the child element of universal credit next, and my colleague Adam is going to talk about this one. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Lee. So when it comes to the child element of universal credit, you usually be responsible. You need to be responsible for a child, or what would be classed as a qualifying young person, and they normally need to be living with you. So you'd usually receive a child element of £235, £235.83 per child per month. But there's an important date to bear in mind. So if your first or only child was born before the 6th of April 2017, you do get a slightly higher amount, and that's £281.25 per month. You won't be paid the child element for a third or subsequent child that's born after the 6th of April 2017, unless an exception applies, and I'll give you a couple of examples of this in a moment. So this is often called the two-child limit. Now, these exceptions would include if you've adopted a child, if you receive guardian's allowance for a child, also if there's a multiple birth, so for example, there's triplets or quadruplets. Also, if a child that's under 16 years old has a child as well, that's actually classed as an exception. People as well that have a court order, whether that's temporary as well, they'd be entitled to it. And also if the child was a result of a rape as well, that's also classed as an exemption. There are some add-ons if the child does have a disability. So there's an addition of £128.25 per month per child or qualifying young person if they're in receipt of the standard rate of disability living allowance, for example, or also personal independence payment. Also, there's a higher rate of £400.29 per month if the child's on the highest rate or care component of DLA, or the enhanced rate for PIP or personal independence payment, as it's called. And if we just move on to the childcare element, Lee.
Brilliant, thanks, Adam. So yeah, so the childcare element covers up to 85% of the childcare costs for a child under the age of 16. Now, the most you can get for one child is £646.35 per calendar month. Or for two children or more, it's £1,108.04 per calendar month. And Adam will tell you a little bit more about the restrictions and guidance around the childcare. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, so just important to remember at the moment, if you live with your partner and you were getting the childcare element and one or both of you has been furloughed and are not going back into the work at the moment, then the DWP would expect the person who's at home to provide the childcare, and there wouldn't be any childcare costs at the moment. When it comes to registered childcare, that means that people like grandparents, relatives, or friends won't be classed as registered childcare, and it usually needs to be outside the family home as well. So just important to double check with people whether it is actually registered childcare, otherwise they won't be eligible for the childcare element. Thanks, Lee. If we move on to the carers element.
Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, great. So Adam's going to go through the carers element, but basically, to summarise it up, you've got to be working. You've got to provide care for 35 hours a week, and this produces a payment, of £162.92 per calendar month. However, with COVID, things work a little bit different, and sometimes people don't realise with overnight stays. So Adam can give a little bit more information on that.
Yes, so when it does come to, people often get the carers element confused with carers allowance, which is a separate benefit, and you can actually claim both the carers element and carers allowance. Overnight stays can be classed as that 35 hours that Lee's just mentioned. So it's always important to get this down when people are trying to get the carers element. Now, unlike carers allowance as well, you're not prevented from earning over a certain level, which is actually £128 a week when it comes to carers allowance. So it's always worth double checking and doing a full benefit to check with people that may be carers, because a lot of carers don't realise that they're actually caring for family members and friends, and they should perhaps be claiming the carers element. Thanks, Lee. If we move on to the limited capability for work element.
Yeah, absolutely. Over to you, Adam. Thanks.
Yeah, so when it comes to the limited capability for work element, the person that we claim in it will usually have to satisfy what's called the work capability assessment to get this. So if you're getting what's called the limited capability for work, you don't actually get any extra money. You just won't have to do, for example, the 35 hours work such that you would be expected to do if you didn't have limited capability for work. If you actually get the limited capability for work related activity element, this actually adds quite a significant amount. So it's £341.92 a month to universal credit payments. Now there is usually a 3-month wait for this. You won't get any extras while this 3-month wait goes on. But there are some instances where it is added straight away. So if somebody's terminally ill, for example, or if they've been in the support group for employment and support allowance prior to the universal credit claim, it doesn't always happen, but they should be going straight into the limited capability for work element there. Thanks, Lee. If we move on to the housing element.
Sorry, guys, before you came on, I think maybe we had a bit of a dropout bandwidth during the cares element. We've had some requests. Could you maybe outline the carers element, sorry, again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course, no problem at all.
Yes, so when it comes to the carers element, it's usually around 162.92 per month. If you usually need to be caring for someone that's classed as severely disabled, so they should be getting attendance allowance or personal independence payment or disability living allowance. You can get carers allowance and the carers element at the same time. A lot of people don't realise that. However, it means tested, so it can affect universal credit. It's always worth doing a full benefit check, which I'd recommend if there's any changes in circumstances. It is when it comes to the carers element, a lot of people don't realise that they are actually carers. There is the 35 hours rule, but this can be overnight stays, and during COVID as well, it can be on the other end of a phone as well in some circumstances, kind of being on standby. So always just worth checking if people are over that 35 hours to see if they're eligible for it. Just moving on to the housing element.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, everyone's housing needs are different. If it's someone with a mortgage, they won't be entitled to the housing element of universal credit. They could possibly look at the support for mortgage interest, which is totally separate to the housing element, but it's always just worth checking if people are struggling at the time. Now, when it comes to kind of being a private tenant, your housing costs are calculated using what's called the local housing allowance, and every area is different when it comes to local housing allowance. So if your rent is actually higher than the local housing allowance, you'll be expected to make up the difference with universal credit. So if you're, for example, if you deem to have more bedrooms than you need, you might lose some of your housing element costs. So the reduction is 14% of your eligible rents if you do have one spare bedroom, and 25% if you have two or more bedrooms. Very similar with social housing or council housing. Your housing element's based on your actual rent minus any service charges you might have. So universal credit doesn't cover things such as heating or water or lighting in the home. Again, with social housing, your benefits actually reduced if you have more bedrooms than the rules allow. This can get a bit tricky if children can't share a room because of a disability, or people need to stay for overnight stays, for example. So it's always just worth, again, just getting specialist advice if that is the case. Again, you're going to have to cover a shortfall in your rent. if you do come across someone in that situation, there are what's called discretionary housing payments that councils do offer. You're not guaranteed to get that, but again, it's worth getting specialist advice if people do have a shortfall. Changes in circumstances, such as people moving out of the home, usually give the spare bedrooms, which can be an issue. Of course, what people call the bedroom tax. Thank you, Lee.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adam. Okay, so that's just a little bit of an overview of the 6 elements that make up universal credit. Obviously, I can see that a lot of questions have been coming in, so we're more than happy. There's plenty of time at the end for me and Adam to answer those questions. That's not a problem at all. Okay, what we're going to look at next then is when you're claiming for universal credit, the best case and the worst case scenario. Okay, so for example, making a claim, the best case scenario is that you will receive your payment within 5 weeks. And Adam's just going to elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. So the best case scenario, obviously, this is not actually always what happens. When it comes to the initial claim, it's actually online most of the time for most people. And you do have to jump through quite a lot of hoops. So you'll need all the necessary sort of supporting evidence to show that you're eligible for universal credit and for each element as well. So the initial claim online, they'll expect stuff like your housing costs, your rent. They'll want a tenancy agreement. You'll also need ID, such as a passport, a driving license, proof of address with things like utility bills. If you need the sort of limited capability for work, you'll need to provide medical evidence for this. If you're kind of ill at the moment, you'll need sick notes as well. Things are a little bit different at the moment with people obviously in different tiers. With COVID, a lot of the initial interview now is over the phone at the moment, and there is a bit of leeway when it comes to that support and evidence. Unfortunately, in normal times, if you don't manage to produce all that evidence, this is going to delay your claim, and we'll look at the worst case scenario in a minute. But as we say, you're still always going to have to endure that 5-week wait for universal credit. A lot of people may be entitled to an advance payment. The DWP and universal credit have got a lot better now in letting people know that they may be entitled to it, but there are gaps sometimes, and people don't realise that there is a support payment. This support payment, advance payment, will have to be paid back as well, though, over time, and that will come directly out of your universal credit payments as you get the monthly. Once you've attended your interview, it'll be 5 weeks after that you get your first payment. And if you, as I've just mentioned, if you do have an advance payment, that's when they'll take, usually kind of, it depends how much that you take. For example, if you took 600, they take around £33 monthly off you. If we have a look at the worst case scenario, Lee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it does happen quite a lot. So 1 in 4 people, there was some recent research, don't actually get the kind of best case scenario 5-week, and that can be for quite a lot of reasons. So for example, people that are not computer competent, people that struggle with the online first part of the claim. If you think about people that might have special educational needs, or people with mental health issues as well. People that just haven't had stuff with what's called the journal. So if they haven't produced one piece of ID that's been requested, so if you imagine some people might have fled domestic violence and don't have any documentation at all, this is when problems start to arise with universal credit, because the first initial appointment, if that's not completed properly, you won't receive your payment. That can go on and on. Now, the Trustful Trust did some research, and they found that the wait for the first payment had some really severe and immediate consequences. So 70% of respondents found themselves in debt straight away before their first payment, and 57% experienced issues with their mental or physical health because of that. There's a massive rise of people using food banks during that wait, and 56% actually had housing issues. So obviously, until they get that first payment of universal credit, they're not paying their rent, they're not getting the housing element. So we have seen some instances of landlords straight away not wanting to take people on with universal credit, and also there have been evictions because people haven't managed to get that sorted. So again, it's always worth, if someone is struggling, for example, Citizens Advice have the help to claim service for people that may have special educational needs or complex needs, which will help with that claim. From the initial claim, there'll be support all the way through to the first payment. Thanks, Lee.
Brilliant, thanks, Adam. Okay, so we've just looked at the best case scenario for claiming and what the worst case scenario can look at. So the best case scenario, 5 weeks, is already a long time for somebody to wait for a payment. 10 weeks is kind of, it can destroy lives. It's a crazy amount of time to wait. Now, what we're going to look at next is how changes in circumstances within the elements can either cause an overpayment of universal credit or an underpayment of universal credit, both of which can have devastating impacts on individuals and families. So if we look at the standard element first of all, Adam's going to go into what can cause an under or overpayment on the standard element. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks. Yeah, so when it comes to the standard element, there's quite a lot of things that can come into play that can, when it comes to changes of circumstances, they can cause problems as well. So it's usually a case of changes in hours to do with employment, changes in wages. If there's an administrative error by the claimant, so for example, when we talked about the initial claim a moment ago, if they've missed something, haven't put it in, they may be expected to upload wage slips. Wage slips can sometimes come back wrong. Self-employed people as well can struggle when it comes to showing their earnings and what their incomings and outgoings. There's been quite a lot lately when it comes to people sort of working reduced hours, or for example, working overtime, redundancy pay, things like that can really affect the standard element. As soon as you go over that taper rate, which I'll talk about a little bit at the end, that starts to reduce universal credit. And also there's things like well-intentioned bonuses. So for example, there was a major company in the UK that decided to reward their employees with a £300 cash bonus, which was well-intentioned. But many of the employees that were working for them were on minimum wage and part-time. So the £300 was taken back by the universal credit taper limit, and they actually only received £75 as a result of that. So when it comes to the standard element, it's usually kind of an admin error or a change in sort of wages or hours. If we move on to the child element, Lee.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes, so when it comes to changes in circumstances, it's usually because of a change in the child's environment. So for example, someone else takes responsibility for the child. This could be for many reasons. For example, someone fostering a child or the child being in temporary care. Now, for some people, the UC child element might be refused because the other parent is receiving child benefit. A lot of separated parents, one claims the child benefit and the other claims the child element. When it comes to universal credit, they will only pay the child element to one parent. Obviously, this can cause friction if the child is half the time with the mother and half the time with the father, for example. Also, if parents are contesting responsibility for the child in the family courts, this can often take quite a lot of time. So one parent can only receive the element while this is ongoing. Again, a lot of people, such as if someone's looking after the children for just a short time, like the grandparents, they don't often realise that they do qualify for the child element during that time. So again, quite a lot that can come into play there with changes in circumstances when it does come to the child element. Thank you. If we move on to the childcare element, Lee.
Yeah, it should have changed.
Yeah, sorry, it's a bit slow for me. Yeah. So when it comes to the childcare element, as we touched on before, again, changes in circumstances could be things like you move to a new area. Again, changes in hours. There's a lot of issues with people on flexible furlough at the moment. So when it comes to that, they might have different hours every week. Now, you always need to produce monthly your receipts as proof of hours of work for universal credit. And again, I'll go into a bit of detail at the end about the journal. This will have to be included, otherwise you won't get the costs for the childcare. Again, if you're part of a couple at the moment, as I mentioned before, and you've both been furloughed, one person will be expected to look after the child. I think CPAG did some research last year and they found that 60% of universal credit claimants had their childcare, less than 60% of claimants had the childcare paid on time and accurately. So again, it's something that can go wrong quite a lot of the time. This can put you in arrears as well with childcare providers, and that can cause kind of friction sometimes. Also, some childcare providers, they require a deposit as well, or a payment in advance, and that's not covered by use either. So that can cause issues. And if we move on to the carers element, Lee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so again, when it comes to the carers element, things can change quite quickly. So people can obviously get ill quickly and have caring needs. People might be in and out of hospital. If it's over a certain period, they may stop the carers allowance and then restart it when they get out. Again, this will have to be evidenced to universal credit a lot of the time. And just again, a lot of people don't actually class themselves as carers. So they look after family and friends, and perhaps they claim carers allowance already and think they're not entitled to the carers element of universal credit. So again, it's just always worth checking if people are caring for family and friends and they're not claiming when it comes to the carers element. Thanks, Lee.
Great, and then we've got limited capability for work-related activity next.
Yeah, so similar to the carers element when it comes to changes in circumstances. Again, people often get ill quite suddenly and they might not be able to work for lengthy periods. It could be short periods, or in some cases they may not be able to work again. So as we mentioned before about the limited capability for work assessment, it can be quite daunting for people. You have to score so many points on the assessment. A lot of people, perhaps they don't have the medical evidence, or they don't know the terms that the DWP are looking for when it comes to limited capability for work. Or sometimes we see a lot of the time that doctors perhaps just write this person should have limited capability work and doesn't go into evidence why. So again, it's all about just getting as much evidence to support that claim. But again, a lot can change when it comes to obviously people with long-term illnesses and short-term illnesses. So it's really about just getting as much medical evidence as possible. Excuse me.
Great, and then finally, housing, Adam, thanks.
Yeah, so this is one that changes when it comes to changes in circumstances. That happens quite a lot. So it's all about people moving in and out of houses, people going into full-time education might play a part in it, or relationship breakdown is always a major one when it comes to the housing element. evidence of that as well. So a lot of people don't have tenancy agreements handy. And there could be things as well that may sort of stem from the initial claim. So for example, I had a client last week where English wasn't the first language, and he ticked the wrong box, and Universal Credit had basically assumed that he was sofa surfing, so he wasn't entitled to any the housing element of Universal Credit. He hadn't produced a tenancy agreement, which he did have, but unfortunately, like I said, he ticked the wrong box. So he didn't get any housing costs for 3 months and was kind of relying on food banks. He lost a lot of weight, and it was just some of the local food bank kind of picked up on that and referred him to Citizens Advice. And he'd actually been paying the standard element to cover all his rent, so he literally had no money at all for anything else. So it's just always worth checking what people's housing situation is and if it's changed recently, because there can always be the risk of an underpayment, and that can lead to rent arrears, which ultimately could lead to eviction. Also, it can go the other way around as well. So if someone moves into the house and it's not reported to Universal Credit, that could be classed as benefit fraud, and that could end up in either the person being prosecuted and investigated, or having large repayments taken from the Universal Credit every month. So it's always worth just double checking if anyone's had any recent changes in circumstances. Thanks, Lee.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Adam. So we've heard about what the changes in circumstances can, and how that can affect the different elements and lead to either over or underpayment. Now, what I'm going to look at in the last part before we finish is migration over to Universal Credit. So a large percentage of the population asked, well, before COVID, it was 60% of the population were still on legacy benefits. Obviously, that will have changed since COVID, and we don't have any up-to-date data from the DWP as of yet. But there's still a large proportion of people who are on the old benefit system, which is known as the legacy benefit system. Now, a change in circumstances on the legacy benefit system, you've got two kind of changes that can put somebody from the legacy benefit onto Universal Credit. So you've got a change in their personal circumstance, and you've also got managed migration as well. So a change in their personal circumstances whilst on a legacy benefit could be things like moving home outside of the local authority, getting married or divorced, starting or ending a civil partnership, having a baby or a family member passing away. All of that could mean somebody would move from a legacy benefit and then have to start to claim Universal Credit. Now, a managed migration, this did start out in Harrogate at the end of last year. Obviously, because of COVID, things have been delayed yet again. But what the managed migration does is it's gradually moving people over to Universal Credit, and they have what we call a transitional protection. Now, that transitional protection protects the money that that person was getting on a legacy benefit for a 12-month period. So whatever they were claiming on a legacy benefit is protected once they're migrated over to Universal Credit for a 12-month period. Then after that, if there was any reductions, it would take place after the 12-month period. So changes in circumstances on a personal level will lead to a Universal Credit, which wouldn't be protected. So if payments dropped, then the payments would drop straight away as soon as they go on a Universal Credit. But the managed migration, so getting a letter from the DWP, your payments are protected for a 12-month period under transitional protection. So I hope you find that useful. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our session. Obviously, our training on Universal Credit is a full-day course. So that was just a little bit of a snapshot. Hopefully you enjoyed what you've seen. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Excellent. So while people are having an opportunity, Lee, to pop their questions into chat, thank you for that. It was really interesting. And we have had some through via the chat, so I'll just go through them in order and read them out. So
Brilliant.
we have had a question around the £80 increase, and does it apply to people who have been long-term unemployed prior to April 2020?
Yes, so when it comes to the increase, which Lee mentioned, this was brought in due to the coronavirus. So there is, I think it is going to be looked at, and I do expect it to be looked at in January. There is a lot of campaigning from groups such as Citizens Advice, Shelter, to keep that in place. It could go either way, to be honest. What we need to be careful of when it comes to the increases, a lot of people are doing benefit checks now. It looks like they're better off moving on to universal credit from the legacy benefits. It may be the case for now, but obviously that may be taken away in April. So it's just about making sure we inform people. When it comes to long-term employed prior to 2020, I think you might be talking about the limited capability for work element there. Is that correct?
I'm not sure, so we could ask. The question was from Dahlia, so perhaps you pop that in the chat for us.
But yeah, the increase was brought in for the coronavirus, basically, and initially they did say it was only going to be temporary. So there is a lot of campaigning going on, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen in the news recently.
Okay, so we will come back to that in a moment. Yeah. So how about another question? How is evidence, and there's a couple of questions around evidence. How is evidence provided virtually? And does all of this rely on people? Well, it does. It relies on people having access to technology. So what happens if they don't?
Yes, so this is where it can become difficult. So when it comes to the journal, every universal credit claimant will be expected to use a journal. Now, there is a way around it, but it has to be for good reason. So if someone had special educational needs or was suffering from mental health problems, they could have what's called an appointee, for example, and they could do the claim for them. There's also what's called a non-digital claim. So again, if someone had complex needs, or if someone couldn't get the support or doesn't have access to the internet, they could make a non-digital claim, but they would need to use that language, because a lot of the time, if you just say, you know, I can't do this with my journal, they'll just send you to the local Citizens Advice, for example, to get that claim done.
So sorry to interrupt just for a second. It ties to another question we've had in. So the journal, to explain the journal is the digital application, then is the terminology used for it.
Yes, so that's your communication with Universal Credit. So they can ask you to upload evidence onto your journal. They also expect you to, if you do miss appointments, that will come through to your journal. That you can get to-do lists in your journal. So if you need extra evidence, such as as we mentioned before, utility bills, they may want you to upload pay slips, for example. Again, the journal's getting used a lot more now during COVID, excuse me, since the job centres are actually closed. So your journal is an ongoing line of communication constantly with Universal Credit. And if you do miss appointments, for example, further down the line, so for example, if you have 35 hours work search commitment, which a lot of people will be expected to do, and you don't complete that, you will be at risk from sanction. If you miss an appointment that's been put in your journal, or you don't respond as well, again, that there is a risk there of sanctions. So it can be very difficult for people that perhaps aren't computer savvy.
Yes.
I do have that support, so that's why when people do have kind of complex needs, it's always best perhaps to use the help to claim service, which I'll give the details of. I did see a question pop up about that as well.
Yeah, so I was going to, you're a mind reader, Adam, because you've led me straight into my next question. which is that help to claim service available nationally?
Yes, it is. Yes. So when it comes to help to claim service with Citizens Advice, they will help the person from the initial claim all the way through to the first payment, and if they do have complex needs after as well. So they can help you gather that evidence that you may need. They can also communicate with Universal Credit on the person's behalf to make sure that everything's going smoothly. And if anything else is needed, I'd definitely recommend using it if there are complex needs there.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. And I'll make sure as well that those details are included in the email we send out. And it's worth saying we've had a few requests around the slides. As I've mentioned in the chat, we will be sending out an email as soon as the recording is available via the IEP YouTube channel. We will email you all the link to the recording, and I will ask for those details to be included in the email that goes out so we can make sure you all have access to that. I have another question for you both. In what circumstance is the employer responsible for reporting earnings via payroll for universal credit purposes?
Yes, so there's certainly an element of responsibility there. This is where I've had similar issues at the moment, where there's been that many changes with the furlough and everything, that there have been mistakes made. So while it is the employer's responsibility to give the correct figures, it's going to be the person that's affected with the universal credit. So it will be on them to prove the hours that they've worked. The burden goes on to the person rather than the employer. So that you'll find a lot of the time the person will go back to their employer and say, look, can you give me the correct pay slip or the correct hours? It does happen quite a lot. I do feel for people that work on payroll at the moment, because they're having to keep up with the constant changes that are coming in line since COVID with furlough and flexible furlough. So mistakes can be made. What I always advise to clients, if they work weekly, for example, or they're on 0 hours contracts, is just to, if they can, to upload their pay slips to Universal Credit. So then there's less of a chance of a wrong calculation. But yeah, it's something that happens, unfortunately, and it can happen from people, the actual claimant as well. They may get the hours wrong themselves, and again, you're at risk there of the taper limit, your work allowance going over, as we mentioned before, with the kind of well-intentioned bonus that actually ended up not being given out, unfortunately. So yeah, it's kind of mixed when it comes to who's actually responsible, but it's always going to be the claimant that suffers if the calculation's wrong, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you for that, Adam. So our next question is it still the case that many people need to challenge the decision on LCWRA? If so, do you think they need to know how to get help with this?
Yes, unfortunately, I just touched on it before. With that, it can be a major issue. So the protection should be, if you were on employment and support allowance before, and you're in the support group, what was called the support group, you should move automatically into the limited capability for work-related activity. Just to remember, that's different from limited capability for work. So you do get the extra payments as you would on employment and support allowance, and being in the support group, you do get that extra £321 a month. If you're on limited capability for work, unfortunately, you don't get anything extra. It just means that you don't have to do, for example, the work search or attend interviews, things like that. When it comes to the assessment, it's always best to get support before that. So again, it's a bit like personal independence when you're filling in forms like that. It's the DWP and Universal Credit are looking for kind of keywords. So as I mentioned before, just a note from the doctor saying this person shouldn't be working is often not enough. They want to know what their mobility needs are, what their daily living needs are, what conditions that they have and how that affects their ability to work, basically. So I'd always recommend, when you're filling in what's called the UC50 form, just to get that specialist support from somewhere like Citizens Advice, for example, just so you make sure that you get the points, the scoring system works out for you, because again, there's a lot of people that get put into the wrong groups. So, for example, someone that's perhaps okay 50% of the time, or they have a mental problem, or mental health problems such as bipolar disorder, or they suffer from psychosis, so they can't work some of the time. Things like that really need to be put across, so they're not put into the wrong group. So they're expected to work search for 35 hours a week. They struggle with it, and then they end up getting sanctioned, which we see quite a lot of, unfortunately. So again, it's all about just getting as much medical evidence as you can when it comes to limited capability for work.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Adam. So we're nearly at the end of our time. So if anyone else is waiting with a question, please do pop it in. But I have one final question at the moment, and that is, how many hours and how much do you need to earn before you qualify for childcare element?
It depends, really. It's kind of, when it comes to childcare element, it's your needs. So, for example, if you worked part-time, Universal Credit would probably encourage that. If you were looking to get into a college course or something like that as well. Just to remember, obviously, if you're part of a couple and one person isn't working, they don't have a disability, they'd expect the partner to look after the child as well. And as we mentioned before as well, a lot of the time with people being on furlough as well, they're having the childcare element stopped. So when it comes to hours, it just depends on the hours that you actually work. And when it comes to earnings as well, it's just up to 85% of your costs. So they'll actually support you with that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it seems to, and I'm sure Anila will pop in the comments if it doesn't. We have another question that's come in. What evidence will DWP need to allow a third-party advisor to access a person's journal on their behalf when a claimant is not computer savvy?
That's a good question, actually, and it's something that I actually had myself the other day. So usually what we do is we put out what's called the signed authority to act, and we'd either send that through to with the journal. There's no harm in actually accessing your client's journal if they're happy with that, and they give you permission for it. Obviously, don't save the passwords, and if it's something that the client needs support with, you can certainly write for them. There's no harm in that at all. That's something that I didn't actually know and found out quite recently. But yeah, just a signed authority, just saying from the client, I give your name or your organisation authority to act on my behalf when it comes to my universal credit claim. And just to remember as well, when it comes to situations where people aren't computer savvy, they've still got that option to use the help to claim service.
Excellent, thank you. Well, that's all of the questions that we've had in at the moment. I feel like we've really put you through the ringer a little bit there, Adam, but you were able to answer really well. Congratulations, well done. Excellent. So unless anyone's got any last minute questions, I found that really informative. As I said before the session when I was talking in the setup, I don't feel like I knew enough about universal credit, and I certainly feel like I know a lot more now. We've had Anila's come back and said she meant on legacy benefit you need to work 16 hours and earn £120 each week before you qualify. How much do you need to earn on universal credit for childcare?
Right, I see what you mean. Okay, yes, so it's exactly the same. Yes, you're right. So once you go over that 16 hours, that's when it comes in. Yes, you're absolutely correct.
Excellent. So that's the same there. Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, as I say, that's gone through all the questions and it's been really interesting. We've had lots of requests for can everybody have the information? So yes, I will make sure we rush through getting this onto our YouTube channel today. So I would advise everyone subscribe, because when you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you will get notified of updates and you won't need to wait for us to be able to send the link out with the additional information. Dahlia said, thank you so much, Lee and Adam. You have shed a lot of light on this mystifying subject. It is a minefield. I think that's how a lot of us feel.
Absolutely, so Helen. And just to add, obviously, we've just scratched the surface on it. Obviously, we do full day courses in universal credit and PIP as well. And we've also got a newsletter that we send out as well. So if people visit our website, societymatterscic.com, you can sign up to our mail list and see some of the other work that we carry out as well. So it'd be good to hear from you. Thank you.
Fantastic. That would be great. And what we will do is we'll make sure that information is shared with all our members, because I think Dahlia is exactly right. It is a minefield. And it's something we really don't want to be getting wrong. So it's worrying, isn't it, when it's a bit complicated Absolutely. For us. Thank you so much for your time today, Lee and Adam, and for everybody attended. It's been a great one, and this close to Christmas as well. It's always a difficult slot to have because a lot of people are starting to wind down ready for Christmas. So thank you very much for that. We hope to have you back for a future Live Learn Lunch in the new year. That would be great. For those, as I've said earlier, for those of you, please, and this is to Adam and Lee as well, please do join us for our Christmas. We're doing a jingle and mingle next week. It's, as I say, it's going to be about us getting together, talking a bit of employability, talking Christmas, having some fun, some time to relax, whether you finish work or not. It would be great to have you join us. And we're going to get Christmassy. Scott, who doesn't normally like to get Christmassy, is being made to wear, I don't know whether it's going to be reindeer ears or a Santa hat yet, but I'm making him get Christmassy, and we'll all be here. So it'd be lovely to see you all here. And I've had comments from people, from Liz, lovely to see that it's been your first session with us, but not your last. That's fantastic news, Liz. That makes me really happy. So come to us next week if you can. If not, I will be publishing a programme for the new year. We've got lots coming in the new year. Again, we've got more around fitness. We've got more around mental health. We're going to have some specialist sessions around sensory impairment and supporting participants with sensory impairment issues and how we can best do that. So we've got a packed schedule that will be published. So I very much look forward to seeing you there. And yeah, have a wonderful rest of your week. And if you can't join us next week, I need to start saying this now, if you can't join us next week, wishing you all, from everyone at the IEP, wishing you all a very Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and I look forward to seeing you all in the new year. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.